Hello and welcome. You're watching CNBC TV18. Today we're being joined by Brandon Spencer, who is the president of the Motions business area as well as the member of the Group Executive Committee of ABB Limited. Brandon, thank you so much for joining us here on CNBC TV18. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much for having me and ABB on.
Well, absolutely, Brandon. And I'd first like to understand from you, how is ABB navigating the kind of challenges that we're seeing in the global environment? Of course, on one hand, we have a lot of uncertainties building up. On the other, we are also witnessing global growth slowdown. So how are you navigating these challenges?
Overall, ABB is navigating the challenges well. We're very diverse in terms of geography, and we're very diverse in terms of industry. So we really don't have any industry that represents more than, say, 15% of our overall revenues. And so that allows us to kind of ride the waves a little bit smoother than some of our competition. We also have a very local for local strategy, and so I'm sure we'll talk more about that while I'm here visiting with you today. But kind of those things combined, along with being a technology leader, have really allowed for us to navigate well so far.
Well, absolutely. And are there any particular segments wherein, customers are sort of hesitant to place orders? Are there any sort of delays in terms of investment decision makings or, project timelines? Are you facing any sort of challenges in some segments, if you can highlight that?
Sure, we see some of that. I mean, it's not too atypical, I would say, in the large project business. A lot of our heavy industry clients, whether it's mining, whether it's marine, oil and gas, et cetera, they go through these periods and they have final investment decisions that they take, and that depends on a lot of things that are going on in the macroeconomic environment as well as the geopolitical environment. And so we do see some delay in some things with a little uncertainty with tariffs and some of the trade things that are happening. But we also have really robust pipelines, I would say. So I think there may be a few things in large orders that are a matter of timing, but overall we feel pretty secure in what the pipelines look like, and that ultimately these projects will go because really the society needs for them to go forward with more energy consumption, more overall consumption, and so obviously we're serving some of those industries that support that.
You mentioned about tariffs, and I have to ask you about the US market because it is quite significant for you. Now with President Trump's big, beautiful tax bill, which could potentially reduce or eliminate clean energy tax credits. Of course, we do have the threat of the reciprocal tariffs playing out as well. How are you realigning your strategies for the US market then?
No, I mean, I think our strategy has stayed consistent and really will stay consistent. We have a local for local strategy, which I mentioned earlier. So if you look at the U.S., 75–80% plus of what we sell in the U.S., we make in the U.S., especially if you include Canada and Mexico. Those percentages are even a little higher. India, 85% plus of what we make in India or sell in India, we make in India. Europe, 90% plus. China, 90% plus. And so for us, we're very heavily invested in the markets that we serve, the customers that we serve, and being local for local. And so the tariffs create uncertainty. We believe in open markets and free trade, certainly. But the long run, I think, we still see that a lot of these projects and customers will move forward with some of the spend.
Well, does the big, beautiful tax bill then pose any sort of threat to you because of the clean energy tax credits then?
Yeah, again, if you go back to our diversity that we have across industries, we support renewables. We have some big customers that are executing geothermal projects, for example, in the U.S. that are continuing to make that investment and go forward. Our oil and gas business, LNG, is a big export business for the U.S., and we see some of those projects going forward. So because of the diversity of our business, again, I think we can kind of ride through the cycle and then make sure that we're focused on providing the best technology, local resources, local execution in order for them to execute whichever type of energy value stream goes forward.
Absolutely. So you're saying you're largely shielded from these sort of uncertainties that play out. But I'd also like to ask you about the European side of the market because right now there have been a couple of changes. Of course, there's higher defense spending, but there's also increased focus on energy efficiency as well as investments in some other utilities then. So what does this spell out for you, especially in the European market?
In the European market?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the European market's been down a little bit, certainly tough, but it's also very regional. Northern Europe for us has been strong. We've seen a lot of investment in Northern Europe and the business going well there. Some slowdowns in places like Germany and other countries which have dependency on other parts of the world for export. But overall, we've seen it stabilize, I would say, a bit. across the last, say, 6 months or so. And so hopefully we continue to see those patterns develop for us in Europe. Obviously, that's the home of ABB and a large employee base and manufacturing base. And so, we certainly hope to see that bounce back up here a little bit in the time to come.
So we've spoken about demand in the US market, we've spoken about demand in the European market, but there is one sort of supply side concern that is now creeping up, and that is actually from China, because you must have heard about this. There have been curbs on the rare earth elements that have come from China. So is that a critical element for you, especially in some of these high energy efficient motors like IE4, IE5? Does that sort of put a strain on your production lines?
No, it has not really. I mean, we focus on the metals like copper, aluminum, steel, these kind of things. And so there is a global supply chain of that's not completely dependent on one country like China, for example. We've also innovated in our technology. So we have a synchronous reluctance motor, which gets away from rare earth metals in order to still drive high efficiency. And so it's kind of a combination of other metals that we're focused on and then innovation that we have in our products to make sure that we don't have to consume those.
All right, and now let's talk about India then. You have been visiting a lot of distributors as well as customers. So in an otherwise global, gloomy sort of environment, does India stand out as a bright spot for you? How significant is India from your perspective?
It really does. I have a lot of energy from being here this week, not just the people, which I think are fantastic, but also the market. And so, whatever the GDP is 6.5, 6.2, 7, whatever the right number is, I think what you see is growth. And you see it across sectors and you see it across the country. And so it's not regionalized, it's not one specific sector, it's really everywhere. We've met with cement customers this week, with OEMs that are doing stuff local that are also exporting global for, say, oil and gas, water, wastewater companies, you name it. Everybody's talking about growth still. And so, yeah, again, there's some lumpiness to it if you think about some of the regulatory environment conflicts that have happened and other things. But still, the overall sentiment that we hear from the market is growth. And so, I think that's kind of a positive light. India's also set up in a good spot, I think, in terms of trade partners and how they're viewed on the macro scale for geopolitical. So, I certainly feel comfortable that we can be successful in India and that we can hopefully have some runway ahead of us.
Well, absolutely. India is one of the fastest growing markets in the world then, and of course, the opportunity here is immense. What's also underway is, the kind of shift towards the clean energy, energy efficiency. In fact, by 2070, India has a target to be net zero. So, I'd just like to understand from you, because India is also a very cost-conscious market.
Yeah.
So how do various factors weigh, right? The long-term savings from the energy cost and the higher upfront investment. How do you balance both of them and then present it to your customers? What's your go-to-market strategy for a cost-conscious market like India?
Yeah, maybe let's start at a high level of kind of why do it? What's the value? Because energy efficiency is not something brand new. It's not a new term, we all know it, but maybe why is it applicable? If you think about moving everything to high efficiency motors, if you think about attaching drives to motors and gaining energy savings, you can put at least 10% capacity back on the grid. So one thing everywhere is talking about with data center growth, with population growth and everything is how do we get more energy? Well, we can do it now. We can do it with technology that's available. If we keep applying yesterday's technology to the new facilities that we're building, we're not going to get there. And so I think that's really where we should focus. I was in Vadodara earlier this week, and our factory there, our large motors factory there, we've deployed a motor that's 99.13% efficient. We broke our own world record. So it's always nice at ABB when we get to break our own world record. But that motor will save $6 million over its lifetime in electricity costs for the customer. One motor. That same motor has a payback time of 3 months. So in any boardroom, in any executive office around the world, those are numbers that should resonate. And that's one machine. And so I think for us, really educating the customers, continuing to educate the customers that yes, you might spend a little bit more money today, but what does that mean across the life cycle of 20 years, 30 years? Education of our customers, that we work together on that, and also education on the legislative side. We need governments and local authorities to push the standards higher in order to be that catalyst to drive adoption. And so that's really where we're focused from ABB is, hey, let's show you the value, let's make it real, and then let's work with legislation in order to hopefully help kind of be the catalyst to provoke it.
Well, absolutely, Brandon. And just a short while ago, you mentioned about the kind of sectors that you cater to, right? There are, of course, some conventional industrial sectors that you cater to, but at the same time, there are a lot of emerging segments like semiconductors, data centers. So, I mean, could you help us contrast rather the growth between both the conventional segments as well as some of these emerging segments?
Sure. I mean, a lot of our conventional segments, you know, cement. I mean, cement's got nice growth here in India, but some of the other conventional segments, oil and gas and power generation, others, they might be in the mid-single-digit range, you know, depending upon where you are and which vertical you're talking about. If you start looking at data centers, kind of still in the double-digit growth range. Semiconductors, double-digit growth range. And so these industries they're big consumers of electricity. So they're looking at how do they do things energy efficient. They need the grids to expand so that they can get the power that they need. But you do see, you know, certainly some elevated growth in some of these industries that are looking to spread around the world. So instead of being centralized in one country, you know, India for semiconductors, US for semiconductors, everywhere for data centers, I think is safe to say. And so we do see, you know, elevated growth rates in those.
So double-digit growth rates in segments like data centers and semiconductors.
Yes.
But, you know, I was speaking to a couple of analysts and they've been highlighting that motors and drives are sort of getting commoditized. So in such a market, how do you stand out? Because if you don't stand out, your margins tend to come under pressure. So what is the moat that ABB has in this market?
I think first, being local. So making sure we're in the countries that we have the brick and mortar facilities to manufacture, and that provides us speed. And speed's really important in the markets today. The second is continue to innovate. Push the efficiency standards or requirements higher, what our capabilities are so that we can serve our customers and differentiate with that. And then we have to deliver quality and service. That's a big differentiator for ABB is, you know, we've been in India manufacturing for 75 years. The plant that I was at today opened in 1951. And we're still pouring money into that facility and expanding that in order to serve our customers. And so, you know, being local, innovating on technology, our service business that we have, and then certainly all of our channels and channel partners and paths to market. That allows us to be very close to our customers, stocking goods, all those sort of things. So price is, of course, always a discussion. You're never going to get away from that. ABB is not the low price provider, but we also provide a higher quality, higher efficiency machines, local presence, service capabilities, the list goes on in terms of what differentiates ABB from some of our competitors.
Absolutely, and that brings me to my next question on manufacturing, because a couple of months ago when I spoke to Sanjeev at the Vadodara facility, he mentioned that you know, the global leaders are actually recognizing the power of manufacturing in India, and I think you can give us a peek of what's going on in the boardroom with respect to India.
Sure. I mean, India's third largest market in the world for ABB. So first is the US, second is China, and third is India. So it's hugely relevant to ABB overall as a group. So to my electrification colleagues, process automation colleagues, and then certainly our motion business. So I think the first is huge relevance. We've deployed hundreds of millions of dollars of capital in the last decade into India, into our existing facilities, expanding lines, renovating things. And important that I think is really important for our customers to hear, we've also walked the walk with our facilities. When I was at our facilities today or this week around India, solar panels, high efficiency motors, drives attached to everything, water reclamation, zero waste to landfill, you know, the different certifications that exist in India. So we don't just go tell the customers, you should do this. We're doing it. And we're happy to bring customers, partners, yourselves, you visited our facility, but to bring you all to our facilities and see what we're doing, because there is a business case behind it and it's good for the planet.
Well, and I'd like to also understand from you, you've got presence in China, you also have presence in India. So when it comes to manufacturing in both of these countries, right, what is the competitive advantage that both of these companies offer? And the global supply chain has been trying to de-risk from China. So in such a scenario, how is India placed as compared to some of its other Asian counterparts?
India is very competitive. I mean, especially if you look at total landed costs. So I think you have to look at the total landed costs. And if we look at that, very competitive across lots of different parts of the technology or lots of our different offerings. So we continue to operate on the local for local, so, moving R&D. We have 4,000 plus R&D engineers in India for ABB. So having R&D local, developing the products local, sourcing the components and materials and things locally wherever we can and what makes sense, and then manufacturing it locally. And so for us, that's been the secret to success, to continue to grow in China, to continue to grow in India, and have the market leading positions that we have.
You just mentioned about local for local, but my question to you is, can India be an exception to that, in the sense that maybe it could cater to a lot more other markets in the neighboring region? So what's your outlook on that?
Yeah, absolutely. We are exporting now from India. So some of our product lines, we export 30-40% of what we manufacture here. So I think India has a great capability of exporting knowledge as well as exporting, equipment. In our process automation business, majority of what we engineer globally is engineered out of India. For my business in motion, again, some of the factories we're exporting 30 or 40% to the US, to Latin America, to the Middle East, to parts of Southeast Asia. And so I think there's no reason that we can't have a competitive advantage at great quality, speed, cost, all of it from here in India.
Does that sort of get impacted mainly on account of the reciprocal tariffs that will come through?
I think we have to see where all these things land. It's a little early to kind of predict the outcome when the goalposts are still moving all the time. And so, I think overall, we can still have a competitive position and export from here, especially to certain markets. It may have an impact in various places, but I think overall on kind of the macro scale, it really doesn't impact if we'll be able to export from India.
Sure, and you have a war chest in terms of cash on your books. I think it's somewhere around 5,700 crores for the listed entity in India. So, a lot of your competitors have been, aggressive with their investment plans here. What is your take on your capex plans here in India? Are you looking to expand some of your facilities? Are you looking at inorganic growth opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've read some of the same articles that you have, I'm sure, of competitors opening up plants and these sort of things. And look, I think a lot of the competitors are trying to play catch up. We've been here for 75 years manufacturing. We've poured hundreds of millions of dollars of capital, US dollars of capital, into these facilities to upgrade them and to expand them. And we will continue to do that on a yearly basis to continue to be a market leader across India. I think also inorganic, our CEO, Morton, who's been on your show before as well. Obviously, we have a great strategy out there on inorganic of bolt-ons and what we want to do in order to continue to expand ABB's portfolio. And so India, for sure, an open market for us to look at the inorganic side.
Well, absolutely. And, I'd also like to understand something about your robotics division, because, in the board meeting that had happened very recently, you all have decided to spin it off and list it as a separately listed company. So could you help us understand what is the kind of rationale that goes behind this decision?
Yeah, our robotics business is one of the strongest robotics business in the world. It gets combined and consolidated with the rest of ABB. So it gets compared to businesses that aren't as similar to that business. And so we think if it's standing alone, that business will be very attractive to capital because of the returns that they provide, the market leadership position that they have. And so we believe the access to capital to be compared fairly against other motor competitors and really shine is an opportunity for the robotics business. We've loved having that business in ABB. And we'll see when that time comes and what it looks like. But I think for the robotics business, it's a real positive and viewed that way. There's also not a lot of synergies with the rest of ABB. So they are fairly standalone in terms of how they operate, what equipment they use, those sort of things. And so I think it's kind of a case of even better if you look at turbocharging, which was in ABB, and we spun that out. That's done very well on the open market for their shareholders, for that company. And so sometimes it's just the right decision to make.
So value unlocking for shareholders, that's the rationale.
For sure.
And what would be the shareholding structure?
I don't know the specifics of how that deal will be
Alright,
structured. I mean,
sure.
all that is still to be defined. Where it'll be listed, what the structure of it looks like, all those sort of things are still discussions that are taking place. And since it sits outside of my business area, I'm not on the inside of those discussions.
I completely understand that, but is there a scenario in the future where you see any of the other 3 remaining businesses being demerged, or they largely will continue to be a part of the ABB group?
I think as part of our annual planning, we have an annual planning process that we do to look at the company strategically, both in the short term and in the medium term. We'll always look at our portfolio of what makes sense to be in the business and what may or may not, inorganic moves that we make and those sort of things. So that's an evergreen process. It happens every year throughout the year. And so I think that's how we handle that and how we try and address what's the right portfolio for our shareholders and for our customers.
Well, absolutely, Brandon. And you've been with the ABB Group for the better part of 2 decades now. And, you've been through several capex cycles. You've seen how the company has adapted to global shifts. But I'd like to ask you one question. What do the next 2 decades hold for ABB, especially the motions business? What is the growth potential you see here, as well as the margin outlook?
Yeah, tough to predict the future. as I always joke with our team, after the last 5 years, I stopped predicting the future. But I think if you look long term, the macro trends, decarbonization, circularity, energy efficiency, energy transition, these macro themes are not going away. They're only going to strengthen. The world needs more energy. ABB can help supply that energy, net additions with lower emissions. And so I believe we're strongly positioned to be part of all of these macro trends that are happening and to continue to be a leader in these macro trends that are happening. So, we've been here for 140 years. We plan on continuing to be here as we go forward, and we plan on continuing to be a market leader across all these segments.
Well, thank you so much for that, Brandon. It was a pleasure speaking to you. It was an insightful conversation on how the global outlook is shaping up, as well as the domestic demand going forward. Thank you so much for joining in with CNBC TV18.
Thank you for having me and ABB on. We really appreciate the opportunity. And look, our purpose is to help our customers outrun leaner and cleaner. That's what we're going to be focused on for the decades to come.
Absolutely. Thank you.